All right, welcome to another episode of Decade. This time it's just me and Steve.
Just the two of us.
Rocking our DUCKLIFE hats in the office. And this episode is more kind of reflecting on the year that we've had and kind of thinking about what's going to happen in the upcoming year.
Everyone's predictions went really well for 2020, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now we'd be in the middle of the expo.
Oh yeah, we would.
Yeah, imagine.
Completely forgot about the expo.
It's crazy.
It's something to look forward to for next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I just hope it happens.
Yeah, true.
You never know anymore. Nothing is set in stone. 2020 was super challenging. Forget business, like personally. I don't know about you, but it was a fucking roller coaster.
Yeah, I think for everyone on the planet.
I mean, just the fact that we were in confinement. Like, who would have ever thought we'd be confined? The whole planet would have to stay home.
Do you know what? When COVID started, because we were in China at the end of last year, and then we came back and...
We were in China until January.
Yes. Yeah,
we were in China until the 18th of January.
Yeah, back and forth. And I remember you saying, you were sitting over there and you said, this thing's going to get serious. And I was like, Chris, come on, it'll be fine. It's fine. I'm going skiing. It's all good. And I literally got back from skiing, and that's when reality really hit.
That's so messed up, man.
It feels a long time ago now.
And it's like, it's crazy because everything that you took for granted, like safety, freedom, traveling, going wherever you want, whenever you want, those are never things that you would imagine would change.
Yeah.
Like the fundamentals of like what you can or can't do in your life are forever challenged.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, it's super messed up when you think about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's kind of totally changed what we prioritize, what's important. At least for me, at home, being at home with my wife, my daughter, thinking about all the things that we valued so much, like unnecessarily.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden, a lot more kind of introspective thinking, being mindful, taking care of our health, mentally, physically.
Yeah.
All those things are now super, super important. Whereas before, we used to focus on almost irrelevant things.
Yeah. I think the mindfulness, because I think that's the reflection after the fact, right? Because we're probably, if you think back, you're missing out the 2 or 3 months of shock, and absolute chaos in your own personal mind. So you obviously have a daughter, so that whole journey for you was 100% totally different for me. Just me and my wife at home, and then Laura maybe with just living at home by herself, for example. But certainly the those first few months of then trying to figure out kind of what was going on, I think if you reflect back, for me it's more of a calibration. It's like a reset of what I value, what I put my time into more, and how I prioritize. So constantly on that rat race of prioritizing, okay, what we're going to do this quarter, this year, work was the focus. Family, friends would say, Steve, you work too long, you work too hard, you don't make enough time for us. It's like, that's absolutely fine. This is normal life. This is what we live for. And then all of a sudden that whole door closed, which I think in hindsight is healthy. But that's not the reality for many coming out of this.
But, as much as we like to kind of stroke our own egos and stuff and say that we've become way more mindful, we're taking care of ourselves better.
We're not.
I actually think that in reality, during COVID, we've accelerated out of panic, out of fear. Right? Like, I remember when we recorded that episode with Sarah, the
You and Nadia recorded that episode. That was a really interesting episode.
psychotherapist,
Yeah.
helped us understand, how people feel, how they're managing kind of their mental health, etc. But it's crazy. Like you go into a state of panic, then you go into a state of like overcompensating for fear,
Yeah.
And so when you look at what we did, even just personally, we put ourselves so much pressure out of fear of
Mm.
of failing, right? Because the market in the world has changed so much. So we go home and be like, oh shit, like, what are we gonna do? Like, even
Yeah.
personally, like, oh, I need to put more effort into work and think about getting into new businesses, getting into new areas, new industries, new clients,
Yeah.
and then putting so much pressure on ourselves to perform.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like overcompensating for a fear that, in actual fact, wasn't as warranted as we believed it to be. Like,
Yeah.
that fear, fundamentally, the only thing that changed is people are home.
Yeah.
So when you think about that, it's like there's a huge change in user behavior, consumption, and stuff like that. But the market is still there. People are still there. And so this whole fear that the world was going to end,
Mm.
economies were going to crash, and we can get into the subsidies and the pumping of the markets later. But
No, we've got something good coming for 2021 when we start talking about all of that.
yeah, so we're going to have an amazing episode in January of next year with some awesome guests
Yeah.
specifically about that. But yeah, I mean, in reality, all the pressure and the fear that we developed ourselves wasn't really warranted if you think about it.
Yeah. General societal fear of stuff. Just on that one, I mean, I was a fucking disaster for a few weeks at the start of this year when this all happened. And for me, and maybe for a lot of other people, I didn't know how to be at home that frequently. I didn't know how to be Steve at home around my wife constantly, around friends and family. She basically watched me like almost go through this roller coaster of emotion because I was unable to operate the way that I always operate and where my comfort zone was, which is an interesting reflection on myself because I know that I can be a great guy. I can be a pain in the ass as well. Yeah. So, seeing how that kind of has transitioned over time. And, I'd like to think that coming out at the end of it, then I've figured out how to be at home and how to be around work, but trying to get that balance and try to overcome that fear of not being able to perform. One thing is not being able to perform at work, which is what you were talking about, putting that pressure on. But actually it made you realize that actually there's a fear of, can I perform in my own personal life to the level that is the expectation that, again, that I set on myself. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's, like I said, putting a lot of pressure out of fear.
Yeah.
Feeling the weight of the world.
We only know how to live in fear. We're conditioned that way.
But it's interesting what you said. At the beginning of COVID, I was sharing our home office between me and Nadia, my wife. And within 3 weeks, we realized if this continued, if we would spend 10 hours in the same room, we would kill each other. And so it just wasn't working out. It just didn't work.
Right.
And it took a lot of getting used to, a lot of adapting, a lot of changing. And eventually, after a few weeks, she went upstairs and took one of the guest rooms and turned that into an office, and then I had my office downstairs, and then things kind of worked out. We are creatures of habit. We've always had to go somewhere to go to work and have our own independent space, and then all of a sudden, once you mix personal and professional and you put everybody together, it just didn't work. And I think the whole planet went through that adjustment.
Yeah.
Everybody had to work from home.
Yeah. And
I can just imagine, there were some, I remember at the beginning of COVID, they were saying divorce rates are higher than ever.
Yeah.
And relationships are being tested, and absolutely, I can
100%. Yeah.
And so, everything that we took for granted going into kind of 2020, everything has been challenged, everything's been changed forever. The one thing that's been kind of cool, and I know you and me have talked about this, is we've started to communicate more. And as an expat, obviously, we're used to always having to call or FaceTime or Zoom our family, but the frequency increased.
Yeah.
And the types of conversations and the depth of those conversations, because everyone all of a sudden got super emotional.
Yeah.
Right? Because like, oh, I don't know when I'm going to see you physically again.
Yeah.
And so the amount of communication kind of increased like crazy. But actually, what I find even more interesting is people that are not expats had to communicate through kind of like FaceTime or phone calls or Zoom calls, just like we do as expats. But the entire planet now had a taste of that.
Yeah.
Because nobody could see each other anymore.
Yeah.
And it's just super interesting, and that's continuing. I think that's a good thing. I think we cherish our loved ones more than we, used to maybe. And I think we speak to them and we're open a lot more than we used to be as well. And that's kind of continued.
Yeah, because I think it's about it's making time, like you say, as expats, there was always like a slot in the calendar, call home, check in with sister, revealing like how I organize my family life. But now, more and more people, obviously, they're forced into that digital dialogue and, trying to just make the time and make the effort. And one of the things that I said to you that was interesting is you go through all of this, I haven't got time to meet up or hang out with you. Suddenly you're in lockdown and you're playing board games over Skype or board games over Zoom with friends and family. And what was that app? What was that app that came out? House Party that went out, and then it had the sting operation on it to try and like slow down its growth. Yeah. Well, sting operation. Yeah. But that was all there before. Like we just didn't use it. So and that's what I mean about a recalibration of the way that we interact. I think what will be interesting going into next year is how quickly do we revert back or do we not? Like, do we like learn from this or do we default back to our original settings? Like,
yeah, I don't know. I think there are some things that will remain just because they have been made permanent. Like, for example, I think we know so many companies, including our own, where work from home is a forever to stay thing.
Yeah.
If you want to come to the office, sure, but nobody in this company feels required to come in. So I think that's going to continue. I think commuting and going to offices and stuff like that, I think that's forever going to be the way it is. Sure, there might be an increase, but we know big global companies have kind of made it permanent until next summer anyway.
Yeah.
I think that as a lifestyle, some of it will stick around. I think an interesting one for me is this whole distrust of everything. I think during COVID, what's kind of happened is, it's weird, like there were waves of kind of the impact of COVID, in different areas of life, but one thing that's for sure is there's a huge distrust in almost everything. You know what I mean? Like, the whole COVID as a topic.
Yeah.
A lot of like questions about it. The whole like vaccine, no vaccine debate. Like, there's a whole bunch of questions about it. The whole is social media good for me, bad for me, controlling me?
Yeah.
That's all up in the air. What's true? What's lies? Everyone's questioning everything.
I mean, to the point of, are we even here?
Yeah.
Does this exist? Are we in a Truman Show?
Yeah.
But that distrust, I think.
And I'm sorry. To
go for it.
Government subsidies and pumping markets. Let's not get into it. But all of these things, all of these kind of fundamentals of our lives, social lives, and constructs of societies and economies and stuff like that. All of that in 2020 has been been put into question to some extent. And whether you believe it or not, it is part of conversations everywhere today.
Yeah.
It's, are you a mask person? Are you a vaccine person? Are you being careful? Are you being safe?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Are you, buying crypto or buying real estate? Or are you keeping cash? Do you have your emergency fund? Do you not? Do you believe? Everything is in question. Nobody trusts anything anymore.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So the trust thing, there's so much to break down. The trust thing was there prior to COVID, right? COVID shone a light just on a pre-existing issue in society that we call everything into trust, because there's been a breakdown, an erosion of trust over time.
Yeah.
For whatever reason we can go into, caused by kind of disinformation, technology, social platforms, leaders that lie, no names mentioned. All of these things have basically led us down a path where there's that distrust. And I think the dangerous part to that is that we call into question everything now and say, oh, is this real or is this not real? Whereas actually that, fundamentally there is stuff that is factually correct. It's just now we're calling everything out. And whether that's the right thing to do or not the right thing to do, I don't know whose responsibility it is, or whether you just have to take your own responsibility. But certainly when it comes to the spread of misinformation and the dangers that leads us, or the dangerous path that leads us down in society, I think that's something everyone has to be pretty conscious of, because that distrust is only going to grow and manifest.
But it's crazy. It's like everyone believes that you only see or understand somebody's true colors if you test them, if you put them through some sort of a challenge. And assuming the planet has been pushed through some sort of a challenge, everyone's true colors has kind of been shown.
Yeah.
Politicians, societies, industries, technologies, leaders, friends, family.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone and everything's been pushed into a corner this year. Right? Like, everything's changed. Everything.
Yeah, everything.
And so for everyone has been pushed into a corner not knowing what to do. And only at that point, when you don't have 100% control of everything, you show or play your cards, right?
Yeah.
And show who you are. Right? So it's like, I think this year has really done that. So we revealed a lot of the stuff that were there before.
Yeah.
But now they've been forced to be manifested, right?
But they've been forced and manifested in the sense of if you're backed into a corner, of course you're gonna fight to get out of that corner, right? You got to choose A or B.
Yeah.
But this whole pandemic, everything that's happened in 2020, is straight off it's obviously straight off the back of all of the stuff that's been happening with the fact that most consumers who have access to the internet can see everything anyway. Everything's on the table. So there's no longer that kind of control of narrative that once existed. So now it's just, I can go find out the information for myself. I can judge a politician for a decision that they made, and you and I know this as running a business. You don't always make the right decision as a business leader.
No.
But at the time, you make an informed decision based on what you think you need to make.
Yeah.
But today, if you, and this goes back to the trust piece, if you're a politician in the midst of a pandemic where the whole country is in utter chaos, your economy's falling through the floor, people are losing their jobs, everything's falling apart, and you're like, okay, A or B, we need to choose a path today, right now. What do? You make a decision. Oh, in hindsight, that was a terrible decision. Sure, hindsight's beautiful. But now society doesn't trust you even more, because now they're like, you can't trust this person because they had their own interests at heart, because this information that's being fed to me means that there is an ulterior motive to why they made that decision. And that's what I mean about the dangerous path of the distrust and the access to certain information. I guess this is where, people try to control the narrative. You can't control the narrative today.
But I think that approach of questioning everything is a product of 2020. What I'm saying is, I don't think people weren't looking and searching and getting their own information. I just think that in 2020, because of everything that everyone's lived, everyone is doubling down on that approach.
Yeah, because I think 2016, for me personally, 2016 was the year where I just realized that actually everything is not what I think it is, so I should question everything, right? For personal reasons around, the Brexit scenario, then there's obviously Trump that came in, that called into question everything. Fast forward 4 years, you spend all of that time questioning everything, and then you're either in this box or this box, which goes back to kind of what you're saying, are you a mask or non-mask? This is basically segmentation. Okay, where do you sit on the fence? Are you Republican or Democrat? Are you, Christian or Muslim? Into these different categories. Now it's you pro-vaccine, non-vaccine. We're basically just segmenting ourselves into what our perfect fit is. So like if you think of the way that we would hang out with people now, would you take a vaccine? No. Or yes, yeah, I'll take a vaccine. I trust it. Or you're not going to wear a mask? No, I don't believe in masks. Or I can't hang out with you now. Like, that's literally where we get to.
And it's crazy. Like 2020 has shown the flaws or the gaps in society, right? That we're always brushed under the rug, and those things are always going to exist. People are never going to be exactly the same. There's always going to be two sides of the coin.
Yeah.
But what's weird is that 2020 has really emphasized on that.
Yeah.
Which I find really weird. You know what I mean? And I'm okay with having differences of opinion. I'm okay with having differences of vision and beliefs. That's totally cool, and that's what humanity is. But 2020 has made that a thing. You know, like it's always been there, but in 2020, it's been important. And that's what I find really fucked up, is that it's not important. It doesn't matter if you and me see eye to eye or not. And we don't have to be upset with each other or judge each other because we have different views. But 2020 has made it seem like that's important. Because everything's been polarized.
Yeah.
There's no more middle ground. It's like you're either super left or super right, but you can't be in the middle.
Yeah. I don't blame 2020 for that. That's been something that's happened.
I blame 2020 for making that important.
But do you think that had to be made important for us to start having the conversations where we say it's okay to have middle ground? Because 2016 for me shone a light in terms of how polarizing things were, and how, you know, over the last 4 years we kind of fought and divided based on points of view, and not really opened up much dialogue. And I still think in today's world, we sit here not actually opening up dialogue the way that we should. Certainly leadership doesn't open up dialogue the way that it should always. There's no really that round table piece. So I don't know, I guess I'm challenging, is it a bad thing that 2020 shines a light on the fact that this is the issue, part of the issue in society? Because you can't solve shit if you don't know what the problem is that you're solving in the first place, right?
No, but the problem is that I think it's a problem because 2020 has forced people to believe that they have to pick a side. And the problem that I have with that is that if you pick a side, then you don't see the other side. And if you don't see the other side, then there is no progress in society. And if you only believe your truth on either side, then nothing changes and we just stay stagnant as a planet. We don't agree, we can't make decisions, we can't align. There is no innovation because it's not serving both people.
Yeah.
And so if people are completely divided, because the year of 2020 has made people believe that they have to choose. Because the narrative in media and politics and friendships and relationships has been, are you this or are you that? And that type of conversation, in my opinion, destroys progress. Because it's forcing people to pick a camp rather than learn, be open, innovate, collaborate, right? And middle ground is what allows for things to change.
So I agree with you. I do agree with you, but I also see, I guess, a more positive or optimistic side of it. Before anything can get resolved in that sort of sense, like typical even in markets, you typically see a capitulation before you see a recovery. So for me, 2020 isn't the year where all of this has come to light. For me, picking a side has been there for quite some time. I think people have been doing it. They've just been a little bit, they've questioned, how far should I go with it? How aggressive should I push? I don't think we're necessarily at the other side of, picking those sides and choosing kind of which, path you sit up. But I do think 2020 enabled a kind of a capitulation to say, okay, hold on, this is really messed up. We have to change the dialogue. And that's only going to come at if you go all the way to the top at a country and a leadership level, that's one layer. So setting the right example as a country and as a leader, like hopefully 2021 is going to be a little bit better because maybe the right way to do things, or have an open dialogue and listening to the other people's perspective might actually be part of the example that's being set. But then that's got to come down into every layer and fabric of society, because you and I, we work well together because we don't always see eye to eye and we debate stuff. But you've got to be open-minded to see that. And for me, I think I don't see how 2020 will I don't think we're at the bottom yet of where that complete divide sits. I still think there's quite a bit of roughness that come out the back of that. But once that happens, I think that's where we start to see the shift, and that'll be a decade-long shift.
Yeah, and I agree. I think what you're describing is we didn't get an economic crash, but we got a societal crash.
Exactly.
Right? 2020 was the society's kind of.
The economic one is there, and it's underlying, and it's coming in certain countries.
The societal crash happened, and now there's only one way, and it's up. And I kind of agree with that. I mean, if you put it all together, if you paint the picture, you have what's happening in France right now in terms of the divide, the U.S., what happened with their election.
Yeah.
When you look at Lebanon, when you look at Syria, when you look at Azerbaijan and Armenia, when you look at just the amount of
it's divide and
dysfunction in societies globally. I think we've hit that kind of all-time low, and now hopefully we're rebuilding, and we're starting to see those rays of sunshine. Like we saw New Zealand announce a state of emergency for climate change.
Yeah.
One of the few countries that did that, but never heard. I mean, it's the polar opposite of what everyone else was doing, what was happening. So we're starting to see that slow road to recovery in society. We have those heroes that are kind of shining the light a little bit, and we're starting to see that. So I kind of agree with you. I
just on that, sorry to jump in before. I think the one thing that's important to think about all of this stuff is in today's world, we operate on everything now. Like the expectation is short term. We don't really plan or view things much further ahead than 4 years if you go in political terms. So we only look 4 years ahead. In business terms, we look at quarters. In startups, we look at weeks, minutes. But in reality, these sort of shifts in society, they are decades long. And this capitulation, kind of the 2020 pinnacle in terms of where we're getting to, and this tech revolution and everything that's happening. I still think we're on that kind of decade shift where it's like, okay, this is the technology, this is the divide that we have, this is how we operate as society. Where we shift that, the choice and the decisions that this generation of leadership and society makes over the next 10, 15 years will fundamentally determine what we deem as progress or innovation and peace that then comes out the back of it. I do think the danger of this distrust and everything is that because we only view things that are straight in front of us and we expect things now, that we might not quite be at the bottom of that peace yet. Unless we start to take a longer term view of where things are and that acceptance. But that's a huge society. Like, we're not trained that way. Our generation, the generation below us, we're not trained to think kind of further afield. We're short-term thinking.
Yeah.
And that's part of the challenge with climate change. When we think about it, taking steps now impacts people's lives when we're not here, right? That's, I know it will impact our lives, but that's part of those challenges. It's like an investment for the future.
I think you're absolutely right. I think our generation and the generations after us, because we're not the youngest generation anymore, but
God damn it.
I think we're definitely short term, and I think we're paying the price for that. If we pivot the conversation a little bit and we think about our own business, DUCKLIFE. We were absolutely kind of shaken in 2020.
Yeah.
We lost our biggest client to COVID.
Mm-hmm.
It was like 80% of our revenue.
Yeah.
Right? We were in total fear in the second quarter of 2020.
Yeah.
And we didn't really plan for that. We were talking about it, and we're saying, okay, we need to diversify, we need to prepare for the risk. We need to be ready for a world where, these guys, might not be around, or we don't want them to be around.
Yeah.
And it's a risk. How do we kind of mitigate? We talked about it a few times, but we really weren't. We were very short term. And okay, in retrospect, we really fucking killed it. and we did amazing, and we came back on top, and we're totally fine. And we only had like a couple months of fear, but like holy shit, were we not prepared? You know what I mean? I think that stands true. If you look at the business landscape of what's happening globally, locally,
Yeah.
like everyone got caught off guard, and all the mismanaged or kind of non-forward thinking businesses have all been kind of challenged.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a really good point, because I think there's two sides to this. There's the side where we were underprepared. We're a year and a half old. So, you know, I remember the conversations we were having in China. Like we were thinking and we were talking about it, which meant that we were acknowledging that it was a possibility, which is forward thinking, even if it's only a quarter ahead. The flip side also is us as a small business. One, we're fortunate enough from a cash flow point of view that we were healthy. You know, in a world that prioritizes or believes that debt is healthy, and debt is cheap and free and affordable, therefore I can be in debt and there's no consequences to my debt because everything costs me nothing. So we were fortunate in that sense. Secondly, our size of operation and our kind of, I guess, digital tech mindset enabled us to instantly switch. Okay, close office, online, Zoom, like everything's run remote. You know, we don't have a huge amount of people. Fixed costs are low, other than, you know, in the office space and, you know, cost of running type thing. So we were fortunate enough in that sense. Most businesses had to change behavior, like, and ways that they operate. You know, adapting to new technology. Any leadership, when we know there's tons of management who don't believe in work from home policy. You know, they had no choice. So huge behavioral shifts that are hard enough to change anyway. Add to that technology shifts where businesses are just not built for remote work or running business online.
Plus there was a demand for our service since everyone was rushing to go online as well. So we were an enabler.
Exactly.
So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think we were fortunate in that sense. And then, you know, I think when you think about, you know, the way a lot of businesses have had to try and adapt and run, you know, any business has got a physical space. I mean, we know the difficulties that those type of businesses have had. And still continue to have and will have throughout next year.
You and me kind of debated this the other day, I think, about user behavior.
Yeah, this is a really good one.
I mean, I'm not going to defend it, you know, till I die, but my perspective...
You sure? That's not Chris. What happened? 2020.
I disagree with the notion that a lot of companies are saying, you know, user, you know, spending and user behavior has changed negatively, and, you know, people aren't spending money anymore, and it's, you know, it's hurting the economy, generally speaking. And I think to some extent that there might be some truth in there, but my perspective is the behavior changed, but the overall kind of consumer is the same. And what I mean by that is, you know, I think about my spending habits during COVID, and I'm not representative of the entire planet, but I'm just, for the benefit of this conversation, my spending behavior is changed, but ultimately the same, in the sense that, okay, I don't go out at dinner as often as I used to, and I don't order in as much as I used to, but I cook 3 meals a day. Not me specifically, but I eat 3 meals a day, home cooked meals a day, which means my grocery bill, and I can look at it just in numbers, has increased tremendously. Yeah. So fine, it doesn't go to any restaurant in JLT or a restaurant in DIFC or a restaurant on Deliveroo or a Zomato, but it's going to Kipson's, it's going to InstaShop, it's going to, you know, whatever it is I'm ordering online. So that's been a shift in spend, and I would actually argue that it's gone up as a total, because I'm just eating way more for some reason. And then, okay, less people are going to the gym or the movie theaters or socializing or whatever, but they're doing things to replace that. And it's not like people stop living. I have exercise equipment in my house that's collecting dust, but I really believed I was going to use it, and I spent a fortune on exercise equipment.
Yeah.
Right? Like bikes and skipping ropes and rowing machines and you name it. I mean, it's all bullshit, but I have them and I spent that money.
Yeah.
Right? And so, I spend more on, specific things. I spent so much in my yard. I spent so much improving my lifestyle at home because my lifestyle outside of my home was no longer there. So this whole idea and notion that, consumers are spending less, one, I don't agree with completely. And second, what I would say is if they are spending less, it's because the world hasn't adapted yet. Businesses haven't adapted yet. They haven't understood or paid attention to what the user behavior has done and, catered to it.
Yeah.
Right? You're looking at all these businesses and you're like, holy shit, why aren't you doing 1, 2, 3, And so I think that's the main issue.
Yeah. So, I mean, that second part, I really agree with. I think that change happens over time, right? The transition where people or businesses will evolve and adapt. And I think we live in a world where everything, like, you move quickly, you move fast, like you get it done. I do think consumers are spending less, and I don't think you're necessarily representative of a wider group of people, because it's input 100%. It's input and output, right? If your inflow of cash is less,
if I had lost my job, it would be very different.
So that inflow of cash is less, which means I'm going to rein in my spending. I'm going to deprioritize and reprioritize where I spend that money. 100% reprioritize into spending more money on groceries and healthy eating. That's like healthy lifestyle and making sure there's food on my table. Reprioritize to make sure that I have rent that I need to make, but maybe my travels this year will be reduced. Those basics of kind of what people would have chosen. I think the knock-on effect of the huge knock-on effect on consumers and the way that we actually spend money will be felt next year. And I completely buy into the fact that if businesses cannot adapt rapidly, and we're talking the physical businesses, I saw earlier actually, just a quick pivot, Warner Brothers are going to release all of their movies at the same time with online and cinema, right? So they're very quickly thinking, okay, actually, no, we need to bring in that revenue, whatever deals they've cut. So these shifts are going to they're going to have a huge impact in terms of the way that consumers behave. So yes, user behavior or consumer behavior, human behavior is going to change rapidly. And the businesses that will come on top will be the ones that win outright, come off the back of that. The last recession, 2008, 2009, if you look at that 4-year period between 2008 and 2012, like that whole period, you had the Ubers, the Airbnbs, like that were born in the world and completely transformed the next 10 years. I think coming out of this 2020, certainly from, I think 2020, because it was a white swan event, not a black swan event. We can debate that, but that's probably for another episode. But, we knew that a pandemic potentially would happen at some point. The next 2 or 3 years, the businesses that are born from this, I think that's an interesting shift to see how the physical, people's behavior, or how businesses that are operating our everyday actually pivot and shift. Because I think it is user behavior, and I think consumers in general are spending less. I think there will be a rapid deployment of cash next year at some point, probably halfway through the year. And that's another topic for another day, but that will lead to some drastic impacts that will again impact the way that the economy balances.
I hear you say, money deployment and stuff like that. All I hear is money, and when I think about just our region, there have been some fantastically positioned businesses, startups in the region that have gone under at a time when this was kind of their opportunity.
Yeah.
And it just makes you think about the region and how we've adapted, or how ready we are to compete globally. Because the whole world has been shaken, and now we're looking for, those brands, those companies, those businesses that are well run to kind of adapt and be our Ubers, our Airbnbs. I mean, just yesterday it was announced that Spree is going under. That's fucking sad.
Very sad.
You know, great category. You know, as a young parent of a 2-year-old, I can tell you how valuable that platform has been. We have friends that are in that company. You know, I'm actually I know the founder quite well. She's amazing, super driven. There was 100 people plus that worked there. Earlier this year, we had the Modus, Wonder. We had AWalk, Wonder. All businesses that theoretically during this time should thrive. And I don't want to get into the details of each business, but you know, quite often, and what we hear the most is the reason these businesses haven't been able to survive this opportunistic year is because of, you know, their shareholders, the structure of those relationships, the inability to, you know, back through investment appropriately, and disagreements of all sorts within organizations. Yeah. And I get really worried, you know what I mean? Because, you know, yes, okay, we have the Noons and we have the Amazons and we have these things, but the ability for these platforms, locally built, younger, smaller platforms to succeed are critical at this time. I mean, yes, we have Mum's World, but who's going to compete against Mum's World? You know, who's going to drive the innovation of that category? Yeah. Okay, yes, we have Noon, but it was great when we had AWalk because it was driving down the price and the availability and the variety of that category, right? Of the lower price categories. You know what I mean? And so what we're seeing scares me. We're seeing consolidation of industries and categories to the big players and smaller players that are maybe not so financially safe. Their investors, you know, losing confidence in them for one reason or another, and not supporting or saving these businesses.
But it's not.
And that's fucking bad in my mind. Like, that's really bad for the startup ecosystem. You know, like.
But it's not a new trend.
Sure, but it's shocking that, like, a company like Spree, that, I mean, it's no secret that they were doing amazing. They had amazing growth during COVID, and naturally, that's true. Like, and that now towards the end of the year, which might have been the biggest growth year, they're not moving forward, and they're not going to be able to, you know, be there in the new year because of lack of funding.
Lack of funding in an environment where there is, and we've seen this, there's an abundance of funding.
VCs.
These guys are sitting on
cash. And what it is that it's just, it's egos and it's greed and it's you know what I mean? And it's like, you know, holy shit, man. Like, you know, like, this is the time to invest in digital businesses. And you have, you know, good businesses that are going under. And I'm not gonna defend the founders or the people running the companies. I'm sure they made mistakes, but generally speaking, you know, like, this is the time where you double down on those investments, and you don't. The bigger fish are just going to get bigger. The smaller ones are going to get eaten up, and to me, I find that unfortunate.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's super unfortunate. So I think the fact that we have seen this is the type of thing that's played out for quite some time, especially in the US, right? Amazon has gobbled up, you know, vast sums of startups and industries. Facebook doing exactly the same. So it's not like we haven't seen this, but there's learnings that should be taken from the way that materializes.
Yeah, but I mean, if we're going to compare the markets, the only thing I would say is that we're nowhere close to maturity, right?
No.
We're still like super nascent, infant stage of our, you know, startup digital kind of transformation of our markets, and to see this happen now is really, I blame it on COVID. You know, people being afraid, investors being hesitant and not deploying the cash, waiting to see what happens. Kind of thinking about 2021 instead of 2020. They've written off 2020. They don't want to make those investments, those bets.
But this is the short-termism, right?
That's the short-termism of our market.
You know, that that lack of willing to kind of step forward. And also going back to what we were talking about in terms of society and that progressive piece, that in society today, we're governed like the idea of, money and wealth and, abundance and all of this stuff, convenience, all of these things sit there. So if it's, I don't know the details of what's happened in a lot of these companies, but if there's sticking points there with shareholders based on greed or, freeing up the cash or disagreements, whatever that is, then that's the wrong investors in the first place, in the sense of the way that money sits today, that wealth transfer, that shift in cash and the way that we invest is, that's something that needs to happen over the next decade, so that good companies, good founders, good leaders, progressive organizations can actually start to move society forward, because otherwise we're still in that rat race of convenience and lower costs and consumption, and we know what consumption leads to and that high consumption piece and the damage that does overall. So it's not something it's not something that I see changing overnight. I actually think we'll see a lot more AWOCs and sprees.
I agree. I think
and there'll be a flood of them in 2021. Not just in this region, it's a global thing. And that's what I mean about the capitulation and the reset. Like, where do we then start attributing value and change to and progress to? Because for me, that's where the companies, the startups of the future, the ones that will be born out of this crisis, whether they already exist and they pivot or whether they are actually founded over the next 2 or 3 years. That's where I would want to see more money. That's as if I was to be, in that fortunate position of being able to invest, that's where I would want to invest.
But I find it so crazy that our investors, our capital, our region, the people who hold that wealth today are still so short-term in their thinking. Fundamentally, if you invest in markets and businesses, in anything, the idea is the sooner you get in, the better off you'll be.
Yeah.
Right? And so just that fundamental rule of investment is not being applied, right? And so,
that's an era of Warren Buffett days gone by, right?
Yeah.
Invest over a 20, 30-year period, or invest in, I'm trying to, flip. That's trading, that's not investing. So if there's investors thinking of that, then they're not investors in my view, they're traders. There's a definition for that. So.
Yeah, it's true though. It's true. I don't think the maturity of our capital is there yet.
Yeah.
And hopefully that'll come, right? And then yes, we're going to see all kinds of deals and M&A and
I think we will.
Consolidation.
Yeah. You've spoken to a few of them actually on the podcast, right?
It's crazy.
And you've had some interesting conversations.
It's interesting to see. I'm happy to see we're getting more competition in the region too. It's not just local money that's playing, but international money coming to the market. So hopefully that will accelerate kind of the learning, the innovation, the strategic thinking, all that stuff. So that'll happen. But I'm hoping that 2021 also sees the birth of a lot of new startups. You know what I mean? I'm feeling like it's feeling a little bit dry these days. And so I'm excited to see what 2021 is going to do. Us as a business, there's so much happening in 2021.
Yeah.
And I just want to tease it a little bit and talk about it for like the 6 people that are going to listen to this podcast.
For anyone that knows Chris as well, they'll know that this is a guy who doesn't just like doing one thing. We need 100 things to do.
Yeah, it's because Lauren loves to do so many things, and so do you. And
I love it. Yeah.
So I just want to talk about that a little bit. And one of them, I guess we're teasing here. We've turned the T-shirt backwards. But one thing we're super excited about for 2021 that we've been working on for a very long time.
There's a lot of details that we've had to iron out.
Yeah. And maybe we should have Lauren on one of the next episodes to tell us about those details. We're launching a clothing brand.
Yeah.
It's a passion project.
These are not in it.
Yeah, these
are exclusive.
Not in it, although everybody's been reaching out and asking me about them, so maybe we'll make some more. But we're launching a luxury streetwear brand. And we're doing that in partnership with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. And our partnership with that organization goes back years and years and years, but we're finally putting a business model to work that we believe is a sustainable way to kind of contribute to helping refugees. And it's been probably about a year in the making, end to end.
Yeah.
And that's going to go on sale in the very near future. It's a luxury streetwear apparel brand that is unisex that we're launching with the UNHCR. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's super exciting.
That's something that we're doing in early 2021. Last week, we got a confirmation that we're doing another completely out of left field project. We're launching a music festival, and we're doing that across the Middle East in multiple venues. I can't say more at the moment. I can't say who the partners are and what the dates are, but DUCKLIFE is running, managing, creatively directing a music festival. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm fucking proud about that.
And what does everyone want to go and do after 2020?
Yeah, lose their shit and see people and party. And so we're going to contribute to that, hopefully. And obviously, as safety measures, change and adapt, so will the festival. So I think the first few shows might be digital only, and then as society kind of gets safer and as we figure it out, the shows and the concert will evolve to have physical attendance. So a traveling 10 show, 10 concert festival like DUCKLIFE.
Yeah.
That's fucking cool.
I mean, that's really just for us, right?
Yeah, and it's crazy because we've seen that we have really good partners, and we've seen governments and tourism boards and authorities kind of support us. So I think that's super cool.
It's really cool.
I'm really excited about that.
Yep.
The third new project of 2021, we're launching a new business, a new brand, a new digital platform. Won't say more about what it does, but hopefully we'll do that at the end of Q1 or the beginning of Q2.
Yep.
Raise money, don't raise money, we don't know yet.
That was a debate yesterday.
That was a debate.
There's a lot of conversation that needs to happen around that topic.
But it's epic, man. It's like another project that's been about, I would say, almost a year in the making, 10 months in the making. It's in full speed development now. It's a game-changing, disruptive solution. So that's fucking cool.
Yeah.
And we still have our advisory that's going full speed.
Exactly.
I mean, we've introduced social media as another department of something that that we're doing. We're expanding our team from a freelance perspective. We're going to continue to have more partners, more businesses, more clients. The advisory is doing fantastic.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, funding everything that we want to do.
It's true.
So we're super lucky.
Yeah.
And we might even invest in a few companies in the process.
That for sure.
Since we've also done that in 2020.
Yeah.
And so 2021 looks like a year where we're going to have no focus. We're just going to do everything. And we're going to rely on people like you and Lauren to kind of keep us organized. But I'm super excited for 2021. I think it's going to be a really a testing year, but a year where we do the things that we love and that we want to do. Yeah. Just to make sure we don't burn out.
Nah, we'll be fine. But 2021 will be a really good year. And 2020's been a good year. It's just been difficult. We don't like change. Like society, humans, we don't like change. So I think 2021, there's a lot to look forward to. Certainly from a DUCKLIFE perspective, but I also think from society's perspective as well. I think the only way is up, right?
I mean, if we're rock bottom, which I believe we're close to.
We're close to, yeah. And we're in a fortunate position, right? We have a company, we have our, families, we have roof over our head, we can play for food, all of this stuff. So we're in a fortunate position. But yeah, I think if society rallies and like rallies in the sense of like pushing forward to 2021, when we look at it from DUCKLIFE's perspective, which is something to be really pumped about. I mean, there's no holidays, right? No one can take any time off. Period. That's all.
I think like going into 2021, I think we're gonna do another episode in early January. But I think going to 2021, I think one thing that we've adopted as an organization, one kind of basic belief that we have was that 2020 was a year that we were gonna try everything that we ever wanted to do.
Yep.
Right. And so we took that very seriously, and we saw a period of challenge, a period of difficulty as an opportunity.
Yeah.
And we put our heads down and we really did everything. And I'm super, super grateful for the team that we have. Jojo, Andrea, Lauren, you,
your wife,
Nadia, Sylvia, who's pregnant now and time now is going to have a baby. But we have a fantastic team that has really shown tremendous kind of perseverance and strength, and we've accomplished amazing things.
Yeah.
So one thing I would say to anybody who listens to this and who will listen to this is, one thing that I've learned, that we've learned as a business, is in periods of challenge, just really do the things that you really, really believe in. Put your head down, commit, try. And if you fail, so be it. And if the whole world is crumbling, try to do something different. Don't apply the same solutions. Will the clothing work? I hope so.
Yeah.
Will the new business platform, digital platform work? I believe so. Will the festival be cool? I fucking hope so.
Yeah.
I can't wait to party a little bit. And so we did everything that we believed was important to us as a business, that met our values and that we wanted to do, and we just did it.
Yeah.
And we were just so determined to do it. And I think that was something I hope that we can kind of share externally and that we carry into 2021.
Yeah. And there's one bit of advice that I think you can end on. But one thing you always say is do. People don't do enough. They think a lot. I'm guilty of thinking a lot. When you try to plan out and you think through. But the one thing that you do when you think too much is you talk yourself out of stuff. So for sure, 100%, bit of advice, just do. Who gives a shit if you fail? Failure is not actually a bad thing.
I don't know what the expression of the quote is, but it's basically something that goes along the lines of, you'll get the answers in doing, not in thinking.
Exactly.
Right? And so I fundamentally believe that.
That's 2021.
And I think we all believe that at DUCKLIFE, and that's why things get done.
Yeah.
And that's why we have so many things, that are working positively and so many projects that are launching.
Exactly.
But anyhow, this will be the last episode of the year. So I wish everybody, Merry Christmas if you celebrate, a Happy New Year, and appreciate everything that we've had from our, small group of listeners, and from our clients, from our region, from our friends, from our families, from our colleagues. I appreciate everybody, and I'm super thankful, and I'm super proud of everything that we've done this year, and I can't wait to start season 3 of Duck It, with a kickoff episode with you again.
Yeah.
And super grateful. Thank you for listening.